and welcome to Plugin Along, a stream dedicated to LOTRO plugins. Last time on Plugin Along, we looked at some of the flaws with the current deed tracker saving file system and started to improve it. After the stream, I generated the file that we talked about on stream, which lets us look up the deed ID based on the old save file structure. So today we're going to use that to restructure the save file and see what else that breaks in the process and maybe fix that as well. As always, feel free to jump into chat with your thoughts and questions. That can be about LOTRO in general, plugins in specific, or the crafting of plugins in very specific. All is welcome and an open game. All right, so just as a quick refresher, what are we talking about? Okay, so if we could come on into the plugin manager, do a little refresh here. J Miles says, "Oh, come to LOTRO stream and learn about file systems. Feels like I'm back in college." Well, it may not be as glorious as your college days, because we are just talking about what looks like a Lua data structure saved to a file. And LOTRO plugin files are just writing out of a data structure to a file, and how we structure that data is really what we're talking about here today. And it's very human readable, and we'll pop one of those open here in the very near future. But for those of you who might be new to this stream, the deed tracker plugin is a plugin I wrote a while back to be a companion to the in-game deed log, which likes to show you. Let's come on over to Dunland. The in-game deed log likes to sort deeds first by type and then alphabetically. And for me, I find it much more useful for the deeds to be sorted in a hierarchical fashion. So the deeds of Dunland requires you to complete all the Explorer and Quest and Slayer. Okay, well, that requires the Explorer of Dunland deed, which requires each of these deeds in turn, and the Quest of Dunland, and the Slayer of Dunland. And so that hierarchical sense of you can't finish the deeds of Dunland until each of these successive deeds is in the hierarchy is done. And being able to show that and at a glance see how much virtue experience is available, how many LOTRO points are available, that was a very useful thing for me, hence the deed tracker. But the deed tracker is very much built on the bones of someone else's plugin. The Hidbold plugin from, I want to say, Galahad. And let's go ahead and pull that up here, just in case you're interested in rebuilding Hidbold. LOTRO interface.com. If we come and search for Hidbold, Hidbold Assistant by Galahad. This was very much a plugin that I looked at and said, wait a second, I could use this as sort of the structure around which to show these deeds, to bootstrap my way in, because I'm not a visual interfaces person. I'm not a GUI person. I'm more of an algorithms and data structures and behind the scenes kind of person. So having that little cheat sheet, as it were, to work on this was very helpful. And if you are glancing at this, you might see some of the similarities here. You might see, oh yes, that combo box in the middle to select which character, the progress bars, direct ripoff, the same code and everything. Just trying to squish as much verticality out of what was there so you can get more deed names, but yeah, all of that kind of stems from what Hidbold had done before, including the save file system. How do we represent what things are completed or not completed in the file? So Hidbold had very different needs than the deed tracker, and so our save file is perhaps not as good as it could be because we didn't recraft it as we are about to. Okay, so that's the Hidbold Assistant. I'll go ahead and for the rebuilding of Hidbold. Now, that plugin seems like it would have been much more useful prior to the recosting of all of the different improvements, where you might have had to actually pay attention to this. It looks like things used to cost 10 of these tokens to rebuild for like 120 or 200 tokens to rebuild all of the towers. And nowadays, those each just take 1 token. And so you probably have to pay a little less attention to this process. The big deal is just getting to kindred with each of those 4 factions. And if you do that, you're going to have enough tokens for the rebuilding of Hidbold. But it's still very cool. Anyway, that's Hidbold. And let's come on in and take a look at the save file. So, plugin files are in Documents, Lord of the Rings Online, the plugin data directory, and then you'll want to go into the account, you'll want to go into the server, and for deed tracker, we're going into all characters. And it will probably be simpler for us if we go ahead and get rid of anything that's not deed tracker. So we're only looking at the deed tracker files. In fact, I don't need these import ones either. Okay, so this is what we're looking at is the core plugin data file. And this is just a few other settings and also the list of character names. And those character names are how these other plugins are named, or plugin data files are named. So for instance, the Affidel file for the character I'm logged into right now looks like this. Let's go ahead and minimize that. And so all of these deeds are saved by what tab they're on, and then, or I guess what page they're on at the top, then what tab they're on at the bottom, and then an internal save index on that page. And as a side effect, excuse me, of how the system works, every single save entry is created when a character is first logged in. So we go through and make sure every one of those entries exists, which means every character's save file takes up 1/3 of a megabyte, whether or not they've completed one deed or every deed, and probably also affects the time to load that file and process it and whatnot. So we're going to try to address each of those. So let's go ahead and bring up our source code. We're using Visual Studio Code today, and we are using the ever-present LOTRO API extension by LunarWater. I haven't checked to see if that's up to date recently, but one hopes it is. And we have a note here from ourselves to ourselves that we want to go ahead and recommit the changes from last time. So last time we made some changes, and I thought those changes might go ahead and break my ability to use the plugin this week. So I went ahead and used a cool feature of source control, which is to say you can step through time forward and backwards kind of as you will. So we can see we have a couple of things here. Oh, just a to-do file note. Our globals should debug options, and someone was encountering a problem, and they popped into the plugin development Discord and said, "Hey, there's this problem," and the problem was occurring on this line number 349. Which was just in this block of code that was meant to be temporary. It was just meant to fix a problem I was having during development and should have gone away. So the fact that that didn't go away, I mean, it shouldn't cause any problems, and yet. So I wanted to go ahead and remember to delete that. So we're going to go ahead and do that as well. And let's bring ourselves forward. Dash and reapply. There we go. So we've stepped forward in time, so we now have the changes we made last week. And I'm going to go ahead and, remove temporary code that is causing someone problems. Great. All right, and we can come ahead to here and just delete this line here, because we've done that. All right. file changes. Cool. That gives us a clean working directory. So it's going to be really easy to get back to where we are right now if we have any problems with any of the code we're writing today. And it's good to be prepared for that. Hopefully it's going to go perfectly, but you never know. Okay, so what we wanted last time was a deed indices to deed IDs lookup table. So I went ahead and generated this. And this is kind of exactly what we want. We have that page and tab and save index. And that gives us that internal deed ID. And that's what we're going to make use of. And we can see, just like any other save file, these are not necessarily sorted. They don't have to be sorted. This is actually in the order that you would see them probably in the UI, but that's just a side effect of how I generated them. These do not need to be sorted. Lua doesn't care. These are, if you spit out a Lua table, you'll also see this kind of in whatever order. So, the important thing, and I meant to, something I wanted to do was I would love to organize the code so that this is kind of hidden a little bit. We only need it for backwards compatibility, and so I think storing it in a subdirectory, just like we stored that turbine file or turbine files in a subdirectory, makes a lot of sense. So I'm not sure what to call it yet, but hiding it somewhere would be cool. And in fact, all of these data files maybe would be worth moving somewhere, but you can't really move files around once they exist. When people are downloading plugins, oftentimes they'll just get changed files or new files, but if you delete a file, the only way that shows up on their end is if they install fresh. And so whenever I'm thinking about moving files around, I am thinking, will it matter if it just sticks around and is sitting in someone's directory for the rest of the time? And the answer is probably not, but, you know. All right, what do we call this? Backwards compatibility sounds weird. It's really forwards compatibility. Save plugin data stuff. I don't know. Plugin data. It's plugin data really. Prior save formats. I don't know. We'll start with that and see how it works. So we're going to go ahead. Perpetual data, says Jane Wells. Yeah, maybe. So we're going to come on into our main, to where we were importing that. Oh, I wasn't importing it there, was I? I was importing it inline, and I was very pleased that we were able to do this. Deed indices, cool. So import cube dtracker dot prior save formats dot deed indices. So this was a thing that we discovered last time, and I think this is really neat, is that Lua is so flexible that you can do an import statement in the middle of a block of code, in the middle of a conditional, so that it only gets imported when you actually need it to be imported. Otherwise, you're not suffering the memory and the memory of loading this data structure in the memory. And just having it sit there for an entire runtime. You're only loading this into memory if you need it for the process of doing this conversion. And then it'll be there until they log out and log back in, but then it's a one-time hit. And so in this file, the deed indices to deed IDs, we have a single table definition. We can even collapse it down. And almost 4,000 lines later, we have the end of the file. So it is just this one table, and that gives us a variable, indices lookup, which is going to be available to us in this block. Actually, it'll be a global variable. It'll be available anywhere after this import statement. But crucially, it's not there if we don't run this import statement because we're not in this else if block. So that's a neat thing. So we now have, it is now populated. Okay, and we're going to use that down here. So we already had the saving out a backup of the 2.0 file. So we're going to have that just in case there's a problem. The user has a problem. We can kind of tell them, hey, go download the old version, put this file back. You'll be fine. You won't have lost any data. So yes, the convert in memory to 3.0 structure. That's something. So we have some pseudocode from last time. Let's see, does it make sense to us? For each ij save index, or complete equals true, do some stuff. Be neat if we had some enums. I was going to look at that. Does Lua support enumerations? We can just use constants, and that's fine. So it says there are no enums in Lua, simply defined variables. Can do. Okay. So I'm not sure where a good place to capture that is, but we'll go ahead and do it here. Constants for plugin data. And what we want are so we're going to have a prefix, plugin data method, unknown, plugin method auto equals 1, plugin method import equals 2, plugin method manual equals 3. And we'll be able to use those later. Uh-oh, where'd it go? Okay, here we are. Okay, so we don't have an actual enum enumeration ability, so we'll just go ahead and use those constants instead. Okay, so lovely pseudocode. Let's see what we can do with that. So what we want is we have, where is our ij? I would very much like that. We had this last time. I, in this case, is the index of characters. That's not good. Were we using these indices elsewhere? Okay, we're looking at the character data. Great. So we're looking at character data deeds, and we really just want to iterate through each of those, each of those. Loops in Lua do not stick in my head, so I have to kind of rethink my way through it each time we do this. So what I really want is the table.maxn. It's not a very efficient way to go through this. I wouldn't want to do this every time because table.maxn has to linearly scan the table, finding the maximum index so that you can then go from 1 to that maximum index. So you're going through the table a whole second time just to get that max index. Kind of, I guess an implementation could do it more efficiently, but that's kind of what you're signing up for. And so maxn is fine in this case because we're updating these files once and then we're done with it. But it's one of those things to watch out for if you've got that creeping into code that's going to get used more than once. Is that the right idea? So we already have an I, and that's not a very good place for us to use our one and precious I. So what we want is car index, and car index. Car being short for character here. And then we can use our other I here. There we go. Okay, so for j equals 1, table.maxN again of Cardata deeds, and that's I, do, and then same thing for save index equals 1 to table.maxN character or Cardata deeds ij do end. But all thing to worry about is that at each of these levels there can be holes. Maxn just guarantees that that number exists, but it doesn't guarantee that it's contiguous from 1. So 1 to n here could have gaps in it where this doesn't work. So if that exists, then end, and then if this exists, so this is it without all of the heavy nesting that we're going to need for this. But let's go ahead and indent that out, well, in. And now we have, we're going to iterate through each of the pages in deeds. And if that page exists, we're going to iterate through each of the tabs in that page. And if that tab exists, we'll iterate through each of the saved things. And if that exists. Fantastic. Now we can do a thing. So the first thing we want to do is use that ijk, but ij save data to get that deed ID. So our local deed ID equals, we have the indices lookup, ij save index. Now, if we want to be really careful, we can also double check that indices I and indices ij and indices ij save index are valid. So we should do that. Verify ij save index validity in indices lookup. I'll mark that as a to-do. But first thing I want to do is actually come in here and just spit out that we found the thing. So, turbine.shell.writeline, just a simple little found deed ID. But if we do all of them, that's going to be like 4,000 of them. We should start discriminating on whether or not the actual deed was completed. So old deed info equals, we're going to go ahead and save off that reference to it, make it a little bit easier. If old deed info, and we know that looks like this, where we have a win and a method and a complete. So we want to know if that dot complete, then, because why not have even more nesting? Now we can go ahead and do our turbine.shell.writeline deed completed, and we'll add in the deed ID there. Okay, let's see what that looks like. This is an ugly indentation, and it just screams out that it needs to be rewritten or extracted to a function or something. But for a minute, we'll go ahead and play around with this. So let's come back into our all characters folder on Treebeard. And in fact, let's make this simpler. We want to go ahead and pretend as if Affodil's the only character, because that'll just make life a lot easier. So Affodil's character number 1, and the rest of these don't exist. And in fact, it might be beneficial to save off what we currently have. So we'll come into Plugin Along. Cool. We have these save files from last time. Let's go ahead and double check that they are essentially the same things. I'm going to use a comparison tool called Beyond Compare. Fair enough. I did have an extra comma there. And then this is always going to be different because the order in which tables get dumped out from Lua into the order in which their members get serialized is just seems very random from a human point of view. There's a method to it, but for us it's madness. Now, one thing I've been using on a hex comparison recently is to come on in and say, don't even try to align this, and it definitely simplifies the view. But as we can see, everything is misaligned. You know, method and then win, but here it's win and then method. It's a mess. So, good enough. Okay, so we have that saved off. And that's important because other things we're doing in here, we're saving off these old versions. Let's go ahead and load. It didn't work. All right, main Lua 230. Always nice when we get an actual line. All right, char data is not finding char data deeds. Fair enough. Did we actually load this? Well, I'm definitely doing something wrong because we're not finding that anywhere else. So let's come on into our plugin functions and char data character deeds. That sure seems important. Load char data car name. Okay. So let's go ahead and just do a find replace on that. So char data car name. Cool. All right, now we see the error in trying to get the indices lookup. That was 239. It looks like I spelled it correctly. But the real question is, where did I load it? So, turbine.shell.writeLine. Let's go ahead and dump that out before and after. Okay, it is nil in both times. Prior save formats, deed indices, deed lookups. I was afraid of that. Did moving it into that into that folder cause problems? I'm betting it did. Okay. Yeah, definitely things are loading now, I think. Okay, so I think there's a subtlety in file structure, global variables that I was missing. Bringing that file back, we can see we found a whole bunch of things. But what's going on in the file system? We've got our version 2 backup. Awesome. It's going to functionally be the same, we hope, but same thing. Oh, it actually did save out. Okay. Since this is what I mean when it feels like it's completely random, but there's almost certainly an internal tree that is representing these tables, and if you have exactly the same stuff in it, sometimes you can get the same output. And if you add or change any one thing, it can rejigger the whole tree and make everything look different, is what it seems like. So let's go ahead and say, cool, we've got a backup file. So we've loaded the character file, we saved the backup, and now we can do the in-memory stuff. Awesome. So we are finding those completed IDs. We can double check ourselves by coming on into the deed info page, file, perhaps I should say. And let's go ahead and copy one of those. All right, that is the deed ID for missions, host layer of the Karam Ubnar. Yeah, it seems like something I might have done. Why not? Okay, so that is a plausible deed. Awesome. So we want to capture the when and the method. I don't care about the complete, except to use it right here. The fact that this stuff exists is a redundancy for the is it completed in the new system. So we're going to come in and get the new method. Okay. We need local. What do we need? We need a structure. It doesn't even need to be local. We need a structure in here that is going to look like what? Where did I put that? Deeds. Okay, so in deeds, we just want, and oh, is there a way to index by number? That would be neat. What does it look like in this? We're getting a number. Okay, we're going to play around with that. I think it's going to be a problem for us to use a number in the save file from a localization perspective, but we're going to try it out. Okay, so we have car data, car name, deeds, and here we can use that deed ID equals, and this is going to be a new table. But we want two things. So we have the old deed info, and that has a when. But the other part we need is the method. Local method int equals, oh, good question though. Do we have an unknown? We do. Great. If old.info dot method equals, and we already know what they should be, what method should be, but it can be easy enough just to refresh our memory if we just select every method possible, paste it on in here, get rid of any trailing commas, and then we just go ahead and do sort lines and then permute the lines to find unique ones. Then we know these are the 4 possible values that we will see. So if it equals auto, then method int equals plugin data method auto. Else if old.info method equals import, then method int equals plugin data method import. Else if old.info method equals manual, then now we don't have an else branch here, but we don't need one. We've started with a known good value, well, not even a good value, but a known valid value. So we started with unknown, and then if it is one of these 3 things that we're expecting, then it will be replaced. Otherwise, it will keep the unknown, but the unknown should only be in place for those where complete was false. And since we're skipping the ones with complete equals false, shouldn't be an issue. We'll see. But at this point, we have method equals method int. Now, the other question I have is, we are doing a lot of use of the same thing, method and when. Method and when. It makes for a moderately human readable structure, but the word method here is being duplicated 3,653 times, and that's what, 6 characters times 3,653. So we're spending 20K in this file just so it's a little bit more human readable, where we could just use M, for instance. And that concerns me a little bit. Now, we're going to have a massive reduction here for the average case where you don't have every deed completed. And so we're only going to see this for those that are completed. But at the same time, do we need method and when we could just have M and W? So I'm going to go ahead and do a preliminary truncation. For the save file, we're just going to see W and M, and we'll see if I regret my choices later. We can always change this up until the point where we release it, and then people's save files have been changed to this. But in the meantime, we'll be able to take a look and see how we feel about that. Okay, so we have a new structure. And importantly, we had a cleanup note. As we finish with each I, set it to nil. Now, if we do that here, we're definitely going to be breaking the plugin. And so we'll be able to play around with that. So other thing we might do in the short term is to say, let's not do that quite yet. But let's take a look and see how this goes. So we're going to not set it to nil. I want to see those outputs in the file first. Okay. Well, I do not see them in the file. So let's double check why that might be. If we go ahead and unload, come on in here, we're going to delete that backup file. And then, are we still seeing this right line? We are not. Why are we not seeing that? There we go. We have marked that we have done the upgrade. Might be a little preemptive. And therefore, we marked that we didn't need to be processing that other file. Okay. We are seeing things now. What on earth did we write? Oh, yes, we were dumping the indices. Well, that will do it. Okay, and so what that shows us is we are seeing the output including these deed index structures that we just added. It's still got the old ones as well, we can see. Can I find the top of here? Yes. Okay. So we still have the one, IJ save index because we didn't set those to nil. But importantly, it's got these other ones. Neat. Now, if we collapse those down, okay, we see a whole bunch of the new ones. Fun. Okay. So, it is not desirable to have these both in the save file eventually. But for right now, having them commingling doesn't actually hurt. And we can see that we're looking at a file that's going to be about 60K instead of a file that's going to be 412K. So that's already a plausible big reduction there. That's very neat. So how does this help us? Well, it's definitely going to simplify things down. And the check to say, is this deed is complete, is just going to be, does the deeds entry for this deed ID exist? And if it does, then it's complete. Okay, that is plausibly all we need. Now let's see why it would be preemptive to go ahead and remove all that old stuff. All right, let's load and prepare for breakage. Yeah. Well, that may have been the wrong place to set this to nil for one thing. It was the wrong place. I should have made a separate loop. That was foolish of me. So what we really want to do is in here. Yeah. In the meantime, I may have managed to mess up my game client. Not permanently, of course, but my game client is possibly spinning in an infinite loop, trying to satisfy what my plugin has asked of it, which is why we test things before we release them into the world. So, what we want to do is take this nulling out of those massive trees of data outside of that loop, probably. Now, the other question, I assume maxn only runs once. This is probably true, but I'm going to be ready to believe otherwise. All right, we're going to go ahead and close the program and go ahead and relaunch it. I feel like we need a plug-in version of the streamer has died on stream command. Streamer has locked up their client one time. This stream. Well, while I'm thinking about it, let's go ahead and restore our 2.0 files. As we are coming back in here. Okay. I'm just going to give the client a minute more to reconnect here. Yes, I'm just waiting for you. Sometimes I should have gone ahead and disabled the change that I just made before trying to launch the client. So we're going to go ahead and stash that one file. Might be broken! Exclamation point. And then relaunch the client. Because if we got ourselves into that same state where it's trying to launch this plugin on launch, yeah, let's just not do that. Before the shadow. I have to remind myself to be patient, but that will be exciting if I manage to like break something on my local installation. Okay. Now, one thing is we definitely still have the system thinking it should load this for me automatically. And as a general plan, we should not have the plugin we're working on loading automatically. All right, let's go ahead and apply this might be broken. Great. Yeah, we can see we did get caught by that again. Okay. Fantastic. So, where are we? We would like to test this idea of nilling out the specific parts of deeds from, that won't work. That won't work because our current system, no wonder this isn't going to work, our current system is using the deed index as the new thing under deed. So instead of 1, 2, 3, it'll be some long internal ID. But that's still an integer, and so our max n is still going to get that involved. And so what we probably would like instead is we could just assume that we're going to have 1 through 9. I think it's a reasonable thing to do. We could also save off the index each time we hit it. But I think it's okay just to say from 1 to 9, do. And the only question I have is this inclusive or exclusive? I think it's inclusive. We'll double check on that. Okay, and then we're doing a patch data save, so we should be able to see it even if the plugin dies after that, which it might. Okay, I did not see it running. Why not? There it is. It did run, it just took a little while. Let's pop that open. That's the backup, awesome. Okay, so the actual save file isn't nearly as small as I was hoping it would be. Why not? What is this? Uncleared, of course. Let's ignore that. Okay, the data is all been converted into the new system. That's very neat. And if we were to hijack just this and copy that out into a new folder, then it'd be a lot easier for us to see how many of these do we have. There's 1091 in there. That seems about right for this character. Now, that being said, am I able to load any of this data? Probably not. It's probably going to look as if none of it's complete because we're still using that old system of telling are things complete. Awesome. But that's actually very promising. That suggests a level of resilience in the plugin that I wasn't expecting. I was expecting to just kind of die when it did not find the structures in place that it was looking for. So that's cool. Okay, we can see these quests are in there. They're still using that old format. Let's make sure we have a note about that. The quests section of the save file. All right. We have that. The uncleared is probably doing something similar. The uncleared section of the save file. And for the uncleared section, that's this recent completions window. I get in the habit of never clearing it, both as a stress test of the plugin, and because it's cool. You can just kind of like go backwards in time and be like, oh, remember that time when we were doing the Tower of Goldor, or oh, Cartographile of Eridor, excellent. I had to clear it occasionally. But yeah, it's nice to have a stress test of where this window needs to populate 250 different completed deeds. And it's easy for me to test with that. So I expect a normal user tends to clear that list pretty regularly. I would expect. But who am I to judge? Okay, so we are in need of a comment for this. Let's update the comment to reflect what we're doing. We are finished with each card data 1 through 9. Set it to no. Okay. So capture win method, don't worry about complete. Excuse me. Okay, we have a to-do method to verify the validity of the I, J, and save index. Make sure it's actually there. Oh, this thing is so indented. It's not pleasing me. So if it's complete and we can just build this up by piece by piece. So if indices lookup I, whoops, and indices lookup IJ, and indices lookup IJ save index. So if the thing was complete and all of this. But if we would like to log especially that we couldn't convert something, then we really do need this to be its own separate if. If then else and else we can go ahead and say info could not update save information for, and we really just have index and that's I, J, save index. And that's not a great error message, but it is kind of a like we should have that. This should be a complete file, and so that's the kind of thing where someone could throw that error message at a developer, and we could kind of dig into what's going on there. But if we had that combined with the check for complete, then we wouldn't be able to differentiate between there was no deed to do and, oh, there was a problem finding the lookup. Which is not a problem, except we're just one more indentation. We're already 1, 2, 3, 4. Before we start this, another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 indexes in. That's ugly. But it is functional, and once it is functional, it is... Yeah, yes. As Cuz says, that is too much if. It's not ideal, but it's for error checking is what it is. We could get rid of half of those if statements if we didn't actually care if we failed, but I do kind of care if we fail, and that's not great. Now, the other thing we could do is instead of iterating through like this, we could use something like iPairs, where we're definitely just getting the indices, and that might be a better choice. I wanted to write it this way just because I kind of wanted to go back to first principles on what would it look like to do a loop like this. But now we see if we're going through and first doing a linear search to find the maximum number and then iterating through, then it looks pretty bad. What would it look like with something like a pairs or an I pairs or whatnot? Well, we actually probably have some of that. If we come into the plugin functions, actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and take a snapshot, make a commit of the changes we have made. And that'll let us kind of save our work while we're working on improving it. So, okay. So we go ahead and update that variable name. That's a good thing to do. Updated variable name. Okay. Initial algorithm to convert version 2.0 to version 3.0 safe structure. Great. Okay, so let's go ahead and kind of refresh our memory with how else do we check through these things. So car data, character, do we have any iterations? Surely we must. There is more table.maxn. That could be its own issue, couldn't it? All right, let's not worry about what other stuff is done at this point. Let's just go take a look at what some of our options are. How much do we care about getting both the key and value, or just the key? All right, where else are we using pairs? We're using pairs already a fair amount, so that's nice. Okay, so if that was going to be what we're doing, then for I in pairs. Excellent. Let's have that available. Redhead has a question about a different plugin. Question for you. I'm loading the songbook on characters that are already logged in, and I don't see it on my screen. What should I do next? Great question. Songbook is a really neat plugin, and if you don't already have it, you can go to the LOTRO Plugin Compendium app. If you don't already have that, follow this link in chat. Nope, gonna need an S. So let's go ahead and install that songbook. We're going to go ahead and add it. We can see it's downloading, installing. Great. So let's come on in to Plugin Manager. Songbook, when it first loads, if you haven't already used it, there's going to be a little symbol just underneath your radar, hopefully, in the shape of a musical note. We can also look into the standard output. Sometimes plugins will include little breadcrumbs of keyboard shortcuts. It didn't do that. There is a command that shows all of the registered commands, and I forget what it is. But for Songbook, we might say, what happens if we type /sv? Didn't work. /songbook spits out these commands. We can do /songbook space show. So songbook space show. So even if you don't find that icon, you can go ahead and type /songbook space show. It's a bit of a mouthful. You can use /songbook space show. Put that in the chat. You can also do hide. You can also do toggle, and these are things you could bind to one of your quick slots as well. All right, and Little Redhead did find it. This is a concern I've had with the D tracker button, which does what so many of the other ones do, and it sort of hides itself. Turns up the opacity when your cursor isn't over it, but that can make it harder to find, less discoverable than just being there. So I've been thinking about an option to be like find my icon, or an option to change that opacity. Haven't done anything about it yet, but it's on the to-do list to make that a little bit more friendly for, especially this. Like that blue color just really fades into the background when you're out here in the wilds. Okay, cool. Great question. Thank you, Little Redhead. But I hope that helps anyone who's watching be convinced that installing a plugin is super easy with the plugin compendium. Okay, so if we were doing I in pairs, what would that look like? Let's just go ahead and do that loop and spit it out. But we're going to want to remember to reset our files here before we get into that. So I'm just going to delete those, copy in the fresh ones, and load our D tracker. Okay, well, we see I in pairs gave us our 1 through 9. So that's a much nicer way to do this. Cool. So I in pairs, and that eliminates the need to check to see if it's valid. So 1 done. Let's go ahead and unindent. Same thing for J in pairs. Do. That allows us to delete that and the check for validity. Get rid of one of those ends. And same thing for save index in pairs. Do. Okay, so that's an initial fix for that indentation madness, is make use of the Lua functionality so that we're not reinventing the wheel there. Okay, so we're iterating through just the i's, j's, and save indexes, aka k's, and then in here, what do we have? We're grabbing that old one, which we know is valid because we know the I and j and save index are valid. Okay, and if it's complete, we're going to go ahead and grab the new thing, if it's available. Get our method as an integer, and create a new save data using those two things. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and report it. Okay, and then at the end, we go ahead and nil out those other ones. Cool. I think that's a much better way to write this. And when we come back in to our source control, we can see that if we deselect the minor changes, we didn't affect any of the logic. We just removed 3 of the indentations by using the proper tools for iterating through tables. Excellent. Okay, fixed iteration through save data. Neat. So that's the first thing. We have our save by deed ID. Done. Any places where we're accessing care data stuff directly, consider replacing it with a helper function. Absolutely. Especially for the save data structures. So what we want to do is come on into the save data accessing and do that very thing. Now we actually already have a function called make save entry, but I am curious to see how it is used. So we have a save entry, and this right here, where we're groveling into the care data, deeds, okay, so this general functionality, we already have a make save entry. What we want is probably 2 new functions to get and set a save entry. Okay, so function get save entry, function set save entry, something like that. Now we also need a new functionality for make save entry. That thing is changing as well. We already had the formatting of the now string. Method is going to be a little bit different. So method equals, well, these are in the main file. We can go grab them. Method equals that. If it is auto, then we can use that. If it's import, or finally, is it manual? Okay, so our save data, we're not going to need complete. So instead, is complete. Instead, what we'll have is save local save data equals nil, and then if it is complete, we'll go ahead and set it to not nil. So save data equals a table. We don't need the complete flag anymore. We have when equals, but again, we're doing W and M. We've got the now string, we've got the method. Okay, our save entry is updated, so any new stuff should be fine. We just need to make sure we don't do a local save data, which would cover up the outer save data. Okay. Okay. So I had a question from the peanut gallery of, once you have Songbook, how do you make sure that it knows about your songs? And that's a fair question because plugins don't have access to your music folder. So what you want to do is you want to make sure you come into your plugins, Chiron directory, and you're going to find this songbook.hta. And when you run it, it's going to ask you which account to build a library for. It's going to look for these accounts somehow. I forget where it's looking for those. And it is going to go ahead and offer each one of the ones it finds. And you just want to build that song library for each account that you're going to use Songbook on. What was that path again? I said it so fast. So you're looking at Documents, The Lord of the Rings Online, Plugins, Chiron, which is the author of the plugin, and in that folder you're going to see songbook.hta. When you run it, it's a hypertext application, HTA, and it'll offer the ability to build that song library. So let's say I wanted to build it for this test account, B41421353. Build, it goes, it does it, it saves, and it's done. But if you're not ready to be done, you can always press F5 to reload it, because internally it's just a web page, and you can just start all over again. And you can quickly just bust through. There's one, there's the next one, there's the next one, and each time you're just pressing F5 to reload it from start instead of having to close out and reopen. Because internally it's just a web page. Cool, great question. This is a fascinating way to work around the problem that plugins don't have access to the music folder. Plugins have access to the plugin data folder. And so the music folder can be scanned by this third-party program, essentially, this standalone desktop program. And it can create plugin data files that encapsulate the information in the music folder. But it doesn't stay in sync. Little Redhead says that they do not have their extensions showing. For me, that's a no-go. I really like having my extensions showing. But what you're looking for is, assuming you're using Windows 10 Plus, if you have the View tab up here at the top of your Explorer window, there is a File Name Extensions checkbox. And if you have that hidden, then you're looking for Songbook of type HTML application. I personally prefer having the file name extensions on, so you can just see songbook.hta, but it's an excellent point. If you have your extensions disabled, you're just going to see Songbook type HTML application. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so we have found a make save entry function that needed to be updated. We would like to get ourselves out of the habit of groveling into, let's see, into the character data entry for where does the save entry go. So we are replacing something. Replace something like this. But really, it's car data deeds, and then deed ID equals save entry. So we need deed ID, and we need save entry. And get save entry, deed ID. And for this, we're just going to go ahead and, whoops, a little bit too much, return care data character deeds deed ID. The real question is, where did that character come from? Because we don't have that here yet. So character, looks like we need to bring that in. All right. Cool. So retrieve the given save entry and set the given save entry. Okay. Those are pretty terrible comments, but it's a starting point. Okay, so what we're looking for is this completed tag. So any of the places where we're doing that. Oh no, I'm sorry. I grabbed the wrong one. We are looking for this save index here. Bad naming of things. Okay. Oh my goodness, I am finding all sorts of fun things. Okay, it looks like we were pulling double duty on where expansion details was listed. So inside each of these pages and tabs, we also had a note called expanded to indicate whether or not in the UI that was indeed expanded or not. Fantastic. So it looks like we don't really want to go ahead and delete everything. We want to delete almost everything. Any of these entries, yes, but the expanded, maybe not. It might be fine to leave that in the data structure. But if that's the case, we need to come back in here and change how we fix this. So we're actually finished with each save entry, so we want to set those to nil. But that's actually easy enough to do. Because remember, we can go ahead and replicate this same iterative process and instead say ij save index equals nil. So let's give that a try. Let's go ahead and make sure we're back to our 2.0 files. And we go ahead and load, not songbook, but deed tracker. Well, that didn't work. All right. But I love it when there's a file name. Interesting. Well, let's double check that we have the ones we're thinking of. Fascinating. What do you mean attempt to index local old deed? Well, when in doubt, add in some debugging. So we're going to go ahead and clear that. We're going to bring this back over, load it back up. Oh, fantastic. The I pairs is hitting the expanded thing, of course. That makes so much sense. Because I had forgotten that was even in there. I wasn't taking it into account. So we actually, if this is so if save index is not equal expanded and all right, let's give that a try. Where we come on in and delete all that in-work stuff, load it back up. Excellent. Another fun one. 226. Well, what on earth? Bad argument number 1 of pairs, table expected got string. Sure. Let's see what we're talking about here. Oh. We are intermixing some of the new stuff. Yeah, so there's some really good advice out there that you shouldn't mutate your collections while you're iterating through them, and this is exactly why you should not do that. Oh, my goodness. So we should do a couple of things here. We should listen to the cat snoring. Okay, so currently contains two things. Save entries for deed completion and expansion information for UI. That second thing doesn't belong here at all. I think it's a convenient way to store it, but it needs to go somewhere else. So this needs to be stored. I guess it can be the same thing. So page tab IJ. This needs to be stored. Change this to be stored in, and then it can be char data, char name, and then it'll just be yeah, UI or something. Make it obvious that it is UI related and not actually deed related. The save entries for deed completion, this is what we're attempting to replace, and we should probably just not be mutating while we're at it. So, two things. While we're in here, if it is equal to expanded, then we should save that off. If save index equals expanded, then else if old deed info complete. Cool. So we want to go ahead and convert over. So make a place for the expanded information. Car data, car name, UI equals that. And then we're going to go ahead and okay, so we can copy off the expanded states out from the deed section where it was just co-inhabiting because it was a convenient place to put it. And then, oh, Margon in chat says, thank you for your work on Seed Tracker. It's the only plugin that I consider must have while playing. Thank you very much for saying so. And you're very welcome. I'm hoping that all of my struggling now will result in a easier to maintain plugin later. Excellent question from Little Redhead, who is interacting with the Songbook plugin. Once I've run the Songbook music library generator, do I need to completely log off or just sign out to the character selection screen? In fact, neither. So let's take a look at this. I'm going to go ahead and unload everything, and we're going to come back to. You know what? Let me go ahead and have two windows. One is the Chiron window, and one is the plugin data window. So Lord of the Rings Online, plugin data. So if we go ahead and come into all servers, we're going to find that songbook file, the songbook data file. So I'm going to go ahead and pretend like I've just installed this. I don't have any songbook information. Come in and load songbook. Okay. Hey, Lord Zach. Okay, so this is Songbook. This is what you see when you first load it up. So if we pop back out to our Chiron folder, we can see it says, what does it say? The song library is empty. Make sure you have ABC files in your music directory and run the songbook.hta file to build the library, then reload the plugin. Cool. So songbook.hta, build the song library, done. So then reload the plugin. So following this, we just unload the plugin, we load the plugin, we launch the window, and it finds all of our stuff. Awesome. So this is behaving just like any other plugin. When you load it, it's able to know that it wants to go look at that file that was generated. It's not looking all the time. It's just looking when it loads. Now, they could have made a button in here to have them go look at it, but plugins get special preference when they're loading and saving files during plugin loading and unloading only. Otherwise, there can be 10 to 15 second delay between asking for a file and getting it. So for most cases, unloading the plugin and loading the plugin again is going to be orders of magnitude faster than some sort of button where it's like, load the file now, and it goes off and it tries to load the file, but it has to wait until the client deigns to give it to them. So when we do a plugins list command, we can see the songbook is loaded, and it does not have anything after it to indicate what is called an apartment. Which means that in order to unload the Songbook plugin, you have to unload basically everything, or really the unnamed department. And so it's good to be prepared to either load everything, or the simple thing is, as Little Red had mentioned, you can just log out and log back in, and then all of your default plugins will get loaded. But if you're just testing things to make sure that the data is there, hit your Unload All button, load up the Songbook, come into the UI and make sure you see what you're expecting to see. Once you've got it all, then yeah, if you're missing all your other plugins, log off, log back on, and then those automatically load fors will kick in when you log in. Cool, good question. All right. I'm going to minimize those and instead give us these. All right. Okay, so we're splitting out the expanded variables. That should not have been there. Expanded. And the other thing we need to do is all of this data that we're generating is not good to mutate the collection as we go through. Oh, Lord Zach says, is there a way to get our position including the z-axis? So, plugins don't have access to your position directly, but plugins can monitor standard chat for something that looks like a /LOC string. So you can always do /LOC, and your plugin can read in this string, which includes your three-dimensional position, if you know how to decode it, which I do not. But when you look at a plugin like, let's say, the Waypoint plugin, for instance, Waypoint, sort of fixes this problem because it's trying to give you a bearing to get to a position. Let's say I wanted to get over to the Grumpwood. Grumpwood is at 13.8 north by 93.7 west. And so with the Waypoint plugin, I can type /way space target space and the coordinates. No, that wasn't it. /way target. Cool. Okay. So in this case, I typed in my command /way space target space 13.8 north, comma 93.7 west. But notice there's a little refresh arrow here. This refresh arrow is saying we don't have a recent enough /LOC. So if I type /LOC, it'll read that in, calculate, and it's basically doing X, Y. I don't think it takes Z into account, but it also goes dead after a moment because your /loc has gone out of. There we go. Okay, so for this, you can keep clicking that. You can have a button for /loc. And the only downside is this is kind of a standard chat spam, which is why I actually don't have standard chat going into my general tab normally. I have a separate chat tab just for standard, just like you see here. And if I want to go look at that, I can. But when I'm doing navigating with this arrow, because it needs to read /loc commands to have live updates, you can spam it as much as you want. The game client doesn't seem to care, but it makes your standard chat channel very chatty. So, Lord Zach, if you're interested in translating a /loc command to coordinates that are more like this 11.9, 95.0, and taking into account the X, which you can see there is a Z. There's an X and a Y and a Z coordinate here in the OX 11877, 57.85, 624.76. There's also an H, which I'm not sure, but I think that is heading. That would correspond because I kept on rotating. So right now my heading is just about north. And we can see, oh yeah, your heading will not actually be there if it is 0. So that's fun. But I turned a little bit and we get to about 90 degrees. Heading is just under 90. Okay, so choosing 360 degrees for a heading. Which way are you facing? Cool. So, Lord Zach, the Waypoint plugin is been pretty reliable for me. If you have the coordinate, if you're in the same map as the coordinates, it seems to be pretty good. If you're inside a building and you're targeting something that's still outside the building, or vice versa, not so much because they tend to use different coordinate systems. Okay, so what is up? All right, so we have something to deal with expanded. We're going to make a parallel structure. Instead of setting something to care data right away, we really want to set a parallel structure that we can use. Lord Zach says, oh man, buildings. Let's not talk about the Elven Keep in North Mirkwood. That showing quest is in the top left of the map in Overworld. Interesting. I haven't gotten up in that area very much. Just a little bit on an oar. Don't worry about it. All right. Okay, so yeah, mutating the collection while we're iterating through it, not a great idea. I think that is biting me. So we need a second place to put it. So if instead we go ahead and make a new deeds and put those there, then I think we can go ahead and just say card data deeds equals card data new deeds, and maybe even not need the rest of this. Hmm. But Zach said, the reason I was asking about Z-axis was wondering if it would be possible to make a plugin that warns you if you're in the vicinity of a treasure chest, but from what you showed, it's impossible without spamming /LOC. Yes. Yeah. Until such time that plugins have access to your position without needing the /LOC command, you're definitely going to need buy-in from the user of the plugin. Now, for me, the Waypoint plugin is great for that kind of thing. If you haven't seen it, the Roving Threat plugin feels like it would be a really good basis for a not treasure. I'm thinking of the those level 95 treasure boxes when you're going and finding them. What are they called? Let's see, area door. Oh, it's not going to show in here. Of course. The treasure caches. Thank you, Jam Wells. Yeah, so RT plugin. Let's go ahead and pull this up. Rare Gundabad chest. Okay, that's beyond where I have gotten. I keep getting distracted with things like plugins, and so. Okay, so if you haven't seen it, the RT plugins is fantastic for roving threats. And I want to adapt this for other things as well. What was the last thing I wanted to do with it? Oh, I don't know. I have to check my notes. But roving threats, each day your roving threats will show up in 3 of these locations generally. And once you find it, it's going to keep respawning there. So this includes the ability to tell other people, hey, it's here. Tell the next one we're going to is at this location. It also will work with your waypoint system. So I can just hold Alt and click there, and that would set the next location. And yeah, you can identify where those 3 spawns are, so that you can quickly come back and keep grabbing them, or tell other people where they are. So I can imagine a system like this where it just tells you where those treasure caches are, and you can just mark off the ones that you have picked up. And so just, hey, when you're in the area, grab these. But absolutely, in order to make full use of this, you'd still be doing that waypoint thing with the /LOC command, which is going to standard. Jim Wells thinks there is a plugin that does treasure caches. It might not be on the compendium, it might not be maintained, although treasure caches haven't changed much. I agree, I don't see anything with cache in the compendium. LOTRO interface. Cache. No. LOTRO plugin treasure cache. Alright, treasure cache tracker. Someone's asking this. So, more maps might already have that information. Nice. Lord Zach asked if I caught a cold. I've got something going on in my throat. Hopefully it's not too distracting. Okay. So, I'm interested in trying this out, where I don't know if this actually works the way I want it to. We should set new deeds to false also. But what I want is just to overwrite at a high level and just say, I wonder if I would even need to set that to nil. I'm curious what this will do. So we're going to go ahead and make sure all of our plugins are unloaded so that they're done writing out anything. Oh, thank you. The water delivery. And we're going to go ahead and copy and paste these on in. And come on back up to dtracker and load that. Well, that did not work. 228. All right, let's take a look at that. completed? Wait a second. What on earth is going on here? How much stuff did I do? Completed equals 0. Yeah, I was definitely avoiding all these little traps by explicitly doing numbers. Okay, so we need to account for that and fix that as well. Okay, so if that entry is completed, then we're going to do something with that. I'm not even sure we need to, but sure, why not? Let's go ahead and place that somewhere else. Car name deeds completed equals this thing. And then we can go ahead and set that to nil to make sure it doesn't persist back out. Jim Wiles asks, one thing from earlier. You said each time you wanted to do anything with the table, you needed to determine the max number. Wouldn't it be better to keep track of that in a global? In other words, update the global var for the number anytime you update the table, or am I totally off the mark? So the tables we're talking about are a reflection of what's going on in the deed log. So in general, there is a very fixed number of tabs at the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, done. But the number of, well, I should call those pages, I guess. But the number of tabs at the bottom for each page is variable. And so Eriador has a specific, but generally fixed number of tabs, as does Ravanian, as does Gondor. And then the number of deeds on a tab on a page is highly variable. And so it is absolutely true that these numbers are known ahead of time to Deed Tracker as far as the deeds that it is aware of. And we might be able to make better use of that. But it is also true that switching to pairs is allowing us to grab some of the data that we just forgot was in there. Like the expansion of the UI stuff that got shoved in there someday. That needs to be pulled back out anyway. Or this completed stuff. So switching over to not relying on what is the maximum number here allows us to capture some of this information that's not even stored as a number as well. Does that make any sort of sense? Lord Zach says, I've noticed my deed book keeps resetting to the class tab. Now, when you say the deed book, do you mean the in-game deed log or the plugin deed tracker? Lord Zach says in-game. Interesting. I wasn't really noticing that. I would definitely believe it does when you first log in. Okay, so we have this completed stuff. Cool. Let's give that a try. Where are we? Let's go ahead and unload everything. It never actually fully loaded anyway. And we can see how useful it was to have those saved versions of that file. All right, detracker. Lord Zach thinks it's something that is broken on the LOTRO side. All right. Okay. We got past where we were trying to get past, and now have an error somewhere else. Awesome. Okay, so what do we have here? We have deeds. It is named correctly. Awesome. Deeds completed. That's been split out. Lovely. The uncleared stuff, don't need to worry about that. UI. Awesome. 1-1 expanded. Now, one could ask, and I am, what's going on? Why don't we just call it UI expanded and just have 1 equals true? And the answer is, I'm worried that there's going to be other stuff that I want to save off at the UI level, and it would be more natural for it to be, here's the UI state of this thing. Is it expanded or not, etc. But before this is all said and done, as we continue to rip parts out and scatter them all across the living room, yes, that might still be changed. Still, that's very cool looking. Now, what's going on with that completed? What should it be? Okay, it was just a value, so it's not getting zeroed out quite right. Completed. Don't mutate the thing while you're... Okay. Sorry. Stop mutating the thing. Oh. We're replacing that anyway. That was redundant. Jane Wells says, Little Redhead says, you're cleaning up that mess on my own. Yeah, well, it's a mess of my own making, so that's only fair. Okay, so unload. It never actually fully loaded, but just in case. Okay, so coming back in. That completed is still getting made to be a table, which I find to be fascinating. Where are we, though? We're in UI. Why does UI have a completed? Completed. Okay, what's going on with UI? Oh, of course. I did that. It was me. By initializing the UI entry for that, before we checked to see if it was something we wanted to do, we were not getting the results we were looking for. Okay, so now we just have the deeds completed, but not the other thing. Perfect. I should really get a character with fewer deeds completed for testing. Also, I think this is calculated when we load and shouldn't be persisted anyway. Or it should be persisted correctly, one or the other. All right, so we have a UI in which we're holding that expansion. That's great. We have pulled things out, and now deeds only reflects what we want it to reflect. Excellent. Love it. Now, downside, the plugin no longer works. And in fact, refuses to load. Little things, right? We're going to go ahead and actually do some committing here. Let's come back to that to-do file. Okay, so functions to change. So we need any place that looks at the expanded value, and now in UI, and any place that looks at the completed value. Now, deeds completed. Okay, so we're done with that. Oh, sorry about that. Yes, the power of the plugin did mute me. Yeah, so I was probably muted after coughing. Lord Zach, I'm curious what you thought of Rings of Power in a non-spoilery sense. Did you like it or did you not like it or whatnot? Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and commit these changes here. So we're doing a better job of splitting out the 2.0 data that should never have been commingled together. And also, we have the updated save entry slash save entry functions. Now, we're not using those functions where we need to, but we at least have them. Too big, loved Rings of Power. Neat. And Lord Zach, it was okay, but they did things that contradict LOTRO, but it's probably things LOTRO invented. It's an interesting point. I was listening to some videos, I think the Civilization X channel, or I can't remember if they have a new name now. They rebranded. Yeah, Civilization X has done some stuff on, history of Lord of the Rings, diving into lore and the Silmarillion and stuff. And it's like, oh yeah, I recognize how they incorporated that story into Lord of the Rings Online. And it's like, oh, but this video is not talking about how this was really this other thing. And I was like, oh wait, that's probably a LOTRO thing. Like they probably took that and ran with it. But you recognize how they came from the same location. A friend of ours has Amazon Prime and has offered that we could come binge it at their place, and we just haven't had the time. Maybe in the new year. Lord Zach, one thing, it's not spoiler, I do not understand, is the orc/goblin burn in the light. Yeah, it's funny. The Lord of the Rings movies, the Peter Jackson movies from, I don't know, 20 years ago at this point, Yeah, very inconsistent feeling with the whole goblins can't be in sunlight thing. That, you know, eventually it's just like, oh no, sunlight doesn't matter that much for these things. I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about, but yeah, at a certain point, it's useful for the game or the movies or whatever to have these enemies not vaporize in sunlight. And yeah, here we are. The Jackson Lord of the Rings movies may not have been too bad about it. I may be thinking more of the Hobbit movies that kind of strayed away from it. Guess I need to just go back and rewatch them all. Okay. So I am curious about this plugins function that is obviously failing. We're running up to the end of the time tonight. So while I look at this failing line 831, if you've got any last minute thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, toss them into chat here. Otherwise, we'll hopefully get to them next week. Okay, so 831 is dealing with a complete flag that doesn't exist anymore. And this is an example of how I suspect there are dozens of places around the code base that are just kind of groveling into the save structure, which is great until we want to go and change how the save structure works. And then you have to hunt down every single one of them instead of, if there was just a function called isDeedComplete, then we would just be changing perhaps what you passed to that function. The real question is, do we have access to the ID? There's another thing about this function. This function is very much about for each deed that is complete, let's go ahead and add up these numbers so that the UI is consistent and whatnot. Instead of just saving it from the last time and using that anyway. It's this whole thing. Wait a sec. We literally have a function called getDeedComplete, and it's not using it? Ah! But what is this deed number? Yeah, okay, that's our K. What on earth? We have a get complete. So we get the deed save index. Sure, we're groveling in, we return that complete. But, oh my goodness, I'm just all sorts of confused here. So we're definitely going to need to fix up so much code. I may actually do some of this during the week instead of trying to do it all on stream because there's just so much to do. But of course, I've got like 72 other things to do. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. But we can see that this needs to be updated. It feels like there's some stuff going on here. Like, these two feel like they should be consolidated. Once getDeedComplete is updated, it'll just work, and then we'll be on to the next one. Okay, so plugin functions 831 fix how we're accessing saved data in. Also, line 835, and that's the getDeedComplete. Cool. So that'll be a good place to pick up the next time we're looking at this code. So, lots of object lessons here. If you have a central idea of are these deeds complete or not, consider making some accessor functions, some getter and setter functions that can be called instead of just groveling the data directly. It'll make your life a little bit easier the next time you're changing something like this. It's definitely a lesson learned. Oh, okay, awesome. Cool. Well, I haven't seen anything else come on into chat. So we'll definitely pick up where we left off there next time. And I think this has been some interesting progress. Definitely some forwards and backwards. But relearning that there's stuff in the save file data structure that just makes no sense to be there gives us that opportunity to pull out those pieces and make sure we don't just drop things on the floor. Or if we're dropping them on the floor, they're in very specific piles. So that's cool. That was an unexpected sort of a side mission today. And that being said, that's all we're going to cover today. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of LOTRO plugins and how they save their data. I hope to see you here next week, and until then, keep plugging along. All right, bye-bye now.